The Custodian Guard are one of the most, if not the most efficient battle line unit in the entirety of 10th edition 40k, and if you are a Custodes player, you definitely should know all the tactics, ins and outs of how to use them, and if you're playing against Custodes, this should be of help to you as well. Firstly, we'll discuss the data sheet itself. They are elite battle line infantry and come in squads of 4, 5, 9 or 10, which is very flexible as far as 10th edition goes. They have a 6-inch move and cost 45 points, but I will be blunt with you, they will be good even if they cost like 50 points and they receive a points hike, and don't be discouraged if they do. Their defensive stat line is quite strong by itself. It's T6, 3 wounds each, 2+ save and 4+ invulnerable save. A very good basic stat line, which is slightly better than the already good profile of the regular Terminator, which is T5, and being T6 is quite important because there are quite a lot of strength 10 threats out there, and also there are numerous strength 3 threats which will also be wounding regular Terminators on 5s and the Custodes on 6s. 3 wounds is also good, but your big problem is 3 damage stuff, because there will be killing a Custodian every time it goes through the invulnerable save. Especially for these guys, because unlike Wardens, which you have access to once per game 4+ shrug, these guys don't have any shrugs whatsoever. Just for those of you who are not maybe that experienced, shrugs is a way of calling the feel no pain ability that some units in 40k have. By itself, their stat line is not something that you cannot deal with by any stretch of imagination. It's good, but it's just not unkillable. However, the basic Custodes rules are elevated severely by the additional rules that they have. The biggest one being the 4+ feel no pain against mortal wounds that you get as a detachment ability. And that one fixes your biggest problem when something like devastating wounds starts firing at your Custodes. You are in big trouble. You would be in big trouble if you didn't have the feel no pain, because that will be going through all of your toughness, your save, your invulnerable save, and punching through and killing your guys, and that's the worst way to lose your Custodes. But with a 4-up feel no pain, that's essentially no longer a problem, because your opponent will be only getting half the efficiency of those attacks. And that's not it yet, because you also get -1 to hit in melee if you so choose with katas. You either get -1 to hit, you can get the 6+ explosions in combat, so you will be getting extra attacks, or you can get 6s do lethal hits in order to wound higher toughness stuff better. Offensively, they are just brilliant in melee, especially compared to what they were in 9th edition, because in 9th, Custodian Guard had 3 attacks, and now a Custodian Guard has 5 attacks in a game where damage 2 is now, again, a very, very good type of an attack, especially massed damage 2 with high AP and relatively high strength, which is exactly the profile of the Custodian Guard Guardian Spear, which is strength 7, AP 2 and damage 2. So one min-sized squad of Custodes will be dishing out 20 attacks. So being quite deadly against almost anything, especially with help of katas. Shield option is also available, but for some reason, which I don't know, they decided to make shields damage 1, make the sentinel blade that shields have damage 1. Yes, I understand you're getting the extra wound for free, and probably if the shields were damage 2 with the same number of attacks and same AP, only the strength was 6, which it is now, it's strength 6, AP 2, damage 1. That would probably be too good, maybe. I'm not sure, to be honest. This should be fixed by the difference in price between the shield and the spear, I think. But they decided to go the other route and just make sentinel blades straight up half the efficiency of the spear, even when you don't count the strength, which is also a big deal, because strength 7 will be wounding almost anything in the game with high toughness on 5s, even like Land Raider stuff will be wounded on 5s, whereas strength 6 is good enough, but still there are a lot of units with that toughness 12 or even 13 where you are not going to be wounding things on 5. You will need 6s, so you will definitely need those lethal hits from kata to actually be able to deal some good damage. I hope they change this in the codex, because as it stands now, the spears are just so much better that there is little point in taking the shields other than just to supplement a squad with extra wounds, which we'll discuss a bit later. Shooting for them is also decent. It's 2 shots, it's strength 4, AP 1, damage 2, and the range is 24 inches, and you get those 2 shots no matter what range you are at, which I love, because previously the spears used to be rapid fire as far as I remember, and it was not awesome because you only got 1 shot at a distance, and that's nothing to write home about. The Sentinel Blade shoots the same 2 shots but at range 12, making it even less of a good choice. And you also get a pistol keyword for the shield. They both have assault keywords, so you can advance and shoot normally, which is wonderful. Abilities is where all the magic happens, in my opinion, for the Custodian Guard, because their main ability is just plainly nuts, especially for such quality melee attacks. It's built-in reroll once to wound, which turns into full reroll to wound in range of an objective. And considering that objectives is where you want to be most of the time for Custodes, that's just crazy good, because wounding on 5s almost anything in the game with full rerolls with such a high AP and damage too, and that number of attacks, obviously, that's gonna kill almost anything, which is proved by numerous tournament winners currently with Custodes. And it also works for shooting, so if you are going to be firing those 2 shots at range 24, your entire squad is going to be pumping 20 shots at strength 4 full rerolls to wound, so anything that is T7 or less is going to be in big trouble. And also, once per game, you are able to double shoot that squad, so in the round where you actually have a very good softer target with lower toughness, and especially if that target is vulnerable to your damage too, like say a big squad of berserkers, you can pump them full of lead with 40 shots hitting on 2s, wounding on 4s with full rerolls and AP 1 damage too, which will probably kill the entire squad. The Custodian Guard also has a built-in deep strike ability, which you will almost never use because there are no modifiers to the charge roll available for Custodes, and can sacrifice one of the spears into a Vexilla, which gives you an OC of 3 for each of the guys, which probably is worth it, and you will still have a Misericordia on that dude, and you can also give him a shield to have an extra wound on this model. You obviously don't want to sacrifice your Vexillas soon, because then you will lose the ability in the OC3, but still, that's something that you can get for free without paying anything extra. As you can see, they are wonderful already. For the price of 45 points, you might as well just build your entire army around these guys, which some players actually have done, and recently one of the grand tournaments was won by a list with 30 of these guys. And that's not it, because their tactics and synergies that are available to the Custodian Guard are just glorious. They are extremely versatile with that palette of abilities, so they can be used efficiently both as the main offensive unit, as I just portrayed, and also there's a home objective control unit. And you might think, like, why would you want to put a unit that costs like 200 points on your home objective? And I will respond to that there are essentially 2 schools of how you can guard your home objective. You can decide to do it with just the cheapest unit you can find, like 40-point sister squad, and that works obviously, but there are a couple of buts here. First of all, the smaller squad usually has a smaller footprint, so you are in bigger danger of being outflanked by a deep striking unit, and also that deep striking unit has a higher chance of actually killing off your smaller unit on the objective. Even if they don't charge them, they can still get rid of them with shooting, for example, very easily sometimes. With a unit of Custodian Guard, that won't be possible. And also, I like to treat that home objective unit as a sort of a late game asset that you can engage at some point in the game when, for example, you don't really need to control that objective anymore, but you need someone to reinforce a flank or go into the center, advance into the center and engage something. That might be what your squad on the home objective can do, and that's why it might be beneficial to have, for example, a 4-man shield squad there, just to have that extra survivability and some punch available to you. I recommend to have 1 or 2 shields in the bigger squads, because that will cut off the efficiency of 3 damage guns or melee attacks that are going to be coming your way. And considering that you don't really care that much about melee, for reasons that I'll state later, the opponent's shooting is actually where most of the damage will be probably coming from. So those 2 guys with shields, especially if you have a command point reroll on standby, they can actually throw a spanner into the works of those damage 3 threats that are trying to kill your most important units. Your goal is to get into threat range and survive the shooting, because really quite few things can hurt you in melee, again for reasons I'll state later, and cover is obviously your friend, so use it wisely. You're an infantry based army, so you want to be hiding behind those ruins as much as possible. And obviously, again, I don't recommend going for deep striking, even if you really think that 6-inch move is too slow, and I agree with you, but there are better ways of getting there than deep striking, because when you deep strike, there is a very high chance that you will not roll that 9 and you will be just stuck there with a very expensive squad that will do nothing for the entire turn and then potentially get smashed in the next turn by your opponent. Now the best part, the synergies. Almost everything in the entire index synergizes well with the Custodian Guard. Firstly, the Blade Champion. He's a must-have character for your force in general and to lead a 9 or 10-man squad. He is going to provide rerolls to advance and charge, apart from being just a badass fighter in general and a good additional threat with some damage 3 attacks as well. He's going to provide the reroll to advance and charge, and also give them a one-off advance and charge in a game, so this will increase their speed dramatically. And also he gives a free heroic intervention strat for them, so you can make them very dangerous to be around. If you also put the Ceaseless Hunter enhancement on him, it's going to be a perfect combination, because it will allow that squad also to be able to fall back and shoot and charge. So as long as they're alive, they will always be a threat to the biggest and juiciest targets in your opponent's army, and they will know it. And also it gives you a one-off 6-inch move when your enemy ends a move within 9 inches of you. If you combine that with a 3 heroic intervention stratagem, you can see how crazy that can be, because if your opponent ends a move within 9 of you, you can just decide to move closer to them, and then you will be eligible to use that heroic intervention stratagem for free. Also, the Shield Captain is equally brilliant for your Custodian Guard, because they allow you to use a free stratagem every battle round, plus double dip into katas, so you can engage both the -1 to hit, for example, and lethal hits or sustained hits, depending on what you want. Or if you think like there is no real threat from your target that you have just engaged, you can just engage both the offensive katas and just destroy it. Talking stratagems, they are just brilliant. The 2 command point -1 damage stratagem and the 2 command point fight first on objective stratagem is why you really want that captain and those shields, because if you think about it, a -1 damage stratagem on a unit that has, on a model that has 4 wounds, it's just wonderful, because then the biggest problem of the shield, which is the fact that damage 2 stuff kills it just as efficiently as it kills 3 wounds model, then everything is reversed, because you will actually need, instead of 3 attacks, you will need 4 attacks of damage 1 to go through that model, and damage 2 attacks will become those damage 1 attacks. So -1 damage is wonderful, and 2 command point fight first on objective is probably the most powerful stratagem you have access to as Custodes, because that's what's going to protect you from all the nasty, or even not so nasty, but chipping away things that are gonna be a problem for your units. You don't really want a huge brick of Terminators to slam into your Custodian Guard and attack first, because no matter how good -1 damage can be or how good your vulnerable saves are, you will be losing quite a lot of guys from that charge. It's very much possible, especially if you don't have command points for that -1 damage stratagem. But if you are able to fight first, and obviously with how fight first rules work now, you will actually fight first in that sense, then you are pretty much going to annihilate at least half of that attacking squad before they get to engage, and this spoils all the plans for your opponent. 1 CP plus 1 to wound stratagem against monsters and vehicles is bonkers, with strength 7 and full rerolls to wound that are available to you. This will just guarantee you killing almost any monster vehicle with a decent size squad of Custodian Guard. 1 CP will also give you one of two things. You can revive a guy each round into each of your squads, but only once into each squad, or you can pay a CP to give your squad sticky objectives. So in the movement phase, you can designate one objective you're on, and it will stay under your control even if you move away from it. Valorous isn't bad, but not captain or champ level by any stretch of imagination, because his buffs are only going to work once per game, like this moment shackle he has. Have a fight first ability he will be able to grant. It's awesome, but only once per game, so I would rather run another just shield captain instead of the Valorous, even though he's quite good in melee. And also his ability to ignore all modifiers for his squad sounds very nice on paper. However, it only works when there are modifiers, and modifiers is not something that you encounter in every game, or at least not always when you are using your squad, whereas the Master of Stances ability that the shield captain gives to double dip into katas, this will be active every time you fight with your squad, every time. And that's why I think Shield Captain is just so much more efficient in competitive sense than Valorous, unfortunately for Valorous. Also, don't forget about the Land Raider. You can fit a 5-man squad plus a Shield Captain into the Land Raider, and it's quite a good way to use them, because then you will be able to move 10, disembark, and potentially charge with your guys. And considering that they have a basic 6-inch move, only the Blade Champion squad is going to be able to effectively advance and then charge, so you might want to use a Land Raider to slingshot your squad across the board and also provide some protection for them before they disembark. So let me know if I missed something about these wonderful golden boys, but in general I recommend to run as many as you can in your current lists, and even if they get some points hikes, they will probably be extremely efficient even still. Yes, there are wardens as well, but wardens don't get such a majestic buff to their melee and shooting capabilities, so I think there is a very good argument in running as many Custodian Guard as you have in your collection. And that's it, guys. I'll see you next time.